Hi everyone, I'm Kathryn Walter. If you've never met, I'm very involved in Informs. I have the CapEx certification. I'm going to be talking today about the Informs Analytics Framework. So let's get started. So bottom line up front, Informs Analytics Framework has 7 domains. I'm going to be talking about where this framework came from. I'm going to talk about each of these domains and talk about how you can put it to use. There's a QR code on this slide. You're going to see a slide a lot in this presentation. But this QR code is the link to go to the full framework yourself. Highly recommend you get the full framework for your own copy. Little background on me. I've had the CapEx in Spokane, Washington. I do hydropower and other types of power generation modeling, mostly using mixed integer programs. Before this role, I was an optimization consultant. Before that, I was in the Coast Guard. I did human resources analytics, and I did search and rescue coordination. And throughout this webinar, I'm going to be giving some examples, some good examples, some bad examples from my own experiences. So you're going to hear a bit about these different roles I've had and how the framework applies, or wish I had it at the time to apply it. So in this webinar, overall, I'm going to talk about what this framework is in general. So the big picture, what is it? Where did it come from? Why care about it? I'm also going to dive into each of the domains, talk about each domain and the task under them and some examples of why they're all important and how they fit together. Give some examples of how to put this to use in industry, how to put this to use in academia, and just in your life in general. So let's get in here. So in general, first, this big picture overview, we have these 7 domains. What is a analytics professional? So the first thing is the business problem question framing. Then for the business problem, it becomes the analytics problem. In order to do any analytics, you got to do things with data. You need to have methods to do analytics, actually make your models, deploy those models, and then manage those models over time. And again, there's this QR code to get this yourself and all the details that go with this framework. But you might be asking, why does this exist? Well, Informs, if you're new here, Informs is the Institute for Operations Research and Management Science. It's a professional society for the advancement of operations research and analytics. You can see the tagline on the slide is smarter decisions for a better world. And that's what Informs wants to do, and it's a nonprofit that serves society. Oftentimes we think it's a club that serves members, but it's not. It's a nonprofit that serves society. And in our society, we need to define what analytics is. I hear people all the time using analytics different ways and different standards. And as a society, we really need a way to say this is what analytics is, this is what analytics professionals do, this is what analytics projects look like, and also a way to give people common language to talk about what these things are. So in 2013, as part of this, what defining analytics, Informs came out with the Certified Analytics Professional certification, the CAP. And in order to have a certification, you have to have a test. In order to have a test, you have to have standards for testing. So they created this CAP framework with these 7 domains to say this is what analytics professionals, if they're experienced, educated, and ethical, and have the soft skills to go along with all these things, this is what they need to be able to pass, and this is what they do as professionals. So we have this CAP framework. That was 2013, and you might imagine that analytics has changed a whole lot since then. So in 2024, there was a major updates to this analytics framework, and it became the Informs Analytics Framework, not just the certification framework. So now, rather than just be tied to certification, it's still tied to certification, but it's not just a certification. It's anyone can use it, whether you have the certification or not, whether you're thinking about getting the certification or not. It's here for everyone to use, for everyone's benefit. And the people who did this, or this list of experienced professionals, I'm very grateful for them to do all the work. It was a lot of time last year they put into this. And you see, I'm not one of them. I'm just a big fan of what they did and this framework. So one thing with this framework that also changed is that we had this cap. And so it used to just be 1 level certification, 1 level of test. And there's this CAP X, what's now called CAP Expert. This also changed this past year. So this is the advanced level. This is the accredited certification that Informs has that you can get if you're interested in it. This is not meant to be a CAP info session. If you're interested in it, there's more ways to learn about it. You can go certifiedanalytics.org. Ask people like me who have it for more information. But this was 1 level though of the CAP, and it was a kind of large barrier to get into. So people coming out of school really didn't have certification. So when they did the upgrade of the framework, they also created 3 levels. You now have this CAP Essential, so you see this as foundational. So it's the core analytics, business understanding, what you can do if you're in school or maybe you're changing careers into analytics. What should you be able to do then? And then a little, and then the CAP Pro, this mid tier. So you're not brand new, but you're also not experienced enough to get that CAP Expert. So now we have these three tiers of what do certified analytics professionals do, what should they be doing at each level of their career. And you might hear me refer to this as CAP E, CAP P, CAP X. Everyone who had the CAP certification before this got grandfathered in under CAP X. This is why I have the CAP X. So with this framework, we have these 7 domains, and we like to think of this as a T-shaped professional. So imagine the little letter T. So also imagine if this is a straight line going across the 7 domains. As an analyst professional, you got to do a little bit of everything. You might not be really great at all of them, but you have to consider all 7 domains. And you might specialize in one of the domains. So you're going to take one domain, get really deep into that, and that's going to create the base of that T shape. So the framework isn't meant to be this is what everyone's doing all the time, but is the things to think about, things to be aware of, and maybe your team is covering all 7 on your analytics projects. And so that when it comes to this framework, again, it's a little bit of everything, but you, as a person, you're probably focused on one thing, but as your team, you probably want to cover all 7. But with that, I just said, imagine a line. This is not linear. I'm going to present it in a linear process, so I'm going to go 1 through 7, but it's not a linear process at all when you put this framework to use. You're often going between domains. Your work might have a lot more in one domain than another, and you're thinking about in one domain, how's that going to affect the other domains? You're not going steps 1 through 7. I've now made my plans, and that's the end of it. It's very much non-linear process. And with that common language in this, what analytic professionals do, and how do we talk about this? We have these technical experts, really the people that are doing analytics, business stakeholders, and this framework provides that common language to bridge these two groups so that we can explain as an analytic professional, I can explain to business stakeholders, what are we doing? Like in words they understand, and they can understand the analytics. So it's this very much this creating these terms and standardizing these terms for this is what to call things in analytics. Oftentimes organizations, especially organizations that don't have a heavy amount of analytics currently going, they're trying to get their analytics enterprise going. So this framework can also provides analytics governance and this roadmap for developing your capabilities. So a lot of times we have these isolated projects and you want to move it to the sustainable analytics capability, and the framework provides the roadmap to do this. And of course, that will lead to meaningful business outcomes. And I really like this phrase that someone else wrote, so I put it on here. Grounding analytics work into a transparent, repeatable, and ethically informed process. So I really like that for the overall what this framework is doing. So that's what the framework is in general. So let's talk about what are each of those domains. Let's go deep into each of those domains. This is the majority of this presentation. So again, I'm going to show this slide a lot. So business problem framing or business question framing, domain number 1. This is develop initial statements, identify all stakeholders, and what are they thinking about, whatever you're trying to do. Is the question friendly to an analytic solution? Not everything needs to be an analytics problem. As much as we like to think it is, it doesn't have to be. Refine the statement. So we're iterating. We're not just going, here's a statement, we're done. It's what does this mean after we talk to stakeholders? Create that business case to show this is why we should be doing this. And of course, obtain stakeholder alignment. You're going to see this task showing up a lot. Now, if you're looking at the official framework, my words here are not the exact phrases. I'm paraphrasing. If I read you the framework, that's all I'd be doing this whole webinar. That's not going to be very much fun for me or any of you watching this. So I'm paraphrasing, but I did try to do my best to keep the spirit of the framework itself. Now, if you're looking at that framework, you'll see that we have this task. You see 1.1, the official task is develop an initial statement of a business problem question. And you also have these subtasks. These subtasks are broken down by the career levels. And so this gives an example of how that looks. So you can see CAP E, CAP P, CAP X. It's not the same task we expect people to do. We know that someone right out of school doesn't have enough experience to be able to do that CAP X level of the subtask. So as you look at the framework, you're going to see all these the tasks and the subtask, and then you can see the different levels of what should you be able to do coming out of school versus what should you be able to do later on in your career. If you're a manager, what should people be able to do of the different levels of career that they're at? This is the only time I'm going to show the screenshot, but again, I really encourage you to look at the framework yourself. I just want to point out that within the framework, it's listed by the 3 levels, so you can get a sense of what those levels are. With business problem framing, that's often not covered in school. My master's program did not cover this. We would talk a lot about model development and those other domains of like doing things with data and accuracy of models and things like that. But we might be told this is why we're doing it, but we're never part of the initial, this is what we're going to be doing. And this has been a gap, at least in my opinion, a lot of education programs. In recent years, many programs out there have made it a very clear, solid effort to get this into their curriculums, which is fantastic. But because we know that so many people have been missing this, or maybe you're learning in school, by the time you actually need it a few years out of school, you just haven't, you've been disconnected from a bit and you really want to get in this business problem framing. So Informs to fill that education gap or that a review, if it's been a little bit since you did learn it, they have this Informs business problem framing course. It's available through Informs, and it's a self-paced, fully online class. I took it recently just for funsies because I thought it'd be a good time, and it was. I had a good time after doing it. Some things were like, yeah, I'm clear on that, but some things were like, oh, that's a good way of putting those of thinking about that, or that's the new model with that they were describing that I could use in my own job. So recommend looking into this if you're interested in learning more about business problem framing. And Informs also has plans to do more courses like this. This is hopefully the first of a series of courses to cover all the gaps in the framework, so that if you want to review a piece of the framework or you never really got a lot of experience in it, you can always go and take that course. So going to the business problem framing, let's now talk about domain 2, analytics problem framing. This is when you take the business problem statement and you turn it into the analytics problem statement. You're going to be talking about your inputs and your outputs. What are your assumptions? This is a really big deal. What's your measure of success? And what are you doing right now? So what's your baseline performance? How are you measuring success? And how can you measure success as the project or the initiative or whatever you're doing goes on? And of course, we want to be identifying your risks and potential mitigation strategies for this analytics problem that you're creating. And again, obtain stakeholder alignment. This comes up a lot. So with this analytics problem framing, this is not the model building. This is not saying we want to do a mixed integer program. This is saying we want an optimization program. This is saying, for example, I work in hydropower modeling. So you have a dam, you're going to send water through the dam to create power. And we want to maybe model that. We have a reason to model that. That's where we say, okay, we have inputs like the water coming into the reservoirs. We have outputs of the water coming out of the reservoir as we decide how much water to use to generate. And then we're going to assume that our inputs are correct. So there's all these pieces to it, but it's not going, I'm getting the data from this source and I'm going to clean the data a certain way, and I'm going to use a mixed integer program with these parameters and these solver settings. We're not there yet. That's a different domain. This is saying, what are we doing in general? One way I like to talk about how to do things in general is using this analytics continuum. I adapted this from a Gartner product a few years ago. So this is going on the x-axis, left to right, level of difficulty get more difficult, and then the level of impact from the bottom to top get more impactful. So down here in the bottom left, we have the descriptive analytics. So going back to my role, I worked when I was in the Coast Guard, I worked in human resources analytics. And so a lot of what we did was predicting how many people we had in each role, in each rank, and how many we would need, and how do we get those numbers the same. So that would start the descriptive analytics of how many people have we had in the past? How many people have we needed? What have been, what are the rates of people leaving? Are there trends to like people joining, people staying, people switching jobs? And then that comes into diagnostic analytics. That's like, why are people leaving? Why are people joining? What are trends we can see over time happening within the workforce? And of course, these things are looking back. Look forward, we're now going to give predictive analytics. We're going to predict, assuming current trends continue, what will happen in the future. And from there, you get to prescriptive analytics. This is going based on what we think is going to happen. What's the best we can do about that? And so based on how many people we have, what do we need to potentially fix gaps? Do we not have enough people? What do we need to get more people? And an example that I worked with in that role was one point we were given a budget of, we have this much money suddenly available for bonuses. How do we give out these bonuses? And to make the best impact on the workforce. Well, we hadn't had these bonuses before, so we didn't have anything go off of knowing certain bonuses would impact people's decisions to help people, to encourage people to re-enlist. So because of the prescriptive analytics right there of we need to figure out how to allot this money in a way that is constrained, because we don't have an infinite amount of money, but we also give the money to people that's going to impact their decision to stay in the Coast Guard. That becomes a prescriptive, and we want to change what's in the future. Well, in order to know changes in the future, we have to have an idea what's going to happen in the future. So that becomes the predictive analytics. So we got to make sure we're predicting who's going to need or potentially be available or interested in this bonus. Now we have the diagnostic analytics of what are the trends we've seen before, and the descriptive analytics of what's happened in the past. So we start figuring out, okay, based on this initial question of how do we best allot this money we have, we've come across the analytics continuum pieces that we have to figure out. And so in this analytics problem framing, we're figuring out, okay, we have this business problem, but how do we do this analytics? We're not yet going, here's the data points that we need, or this is going, where are we on the analytics continuum? What type of methods might we be wanting? What type of inputs and outputs are we going to have? And with this, I like to say CYA, which of course means cover your assumptions. So there's a famous quote in operations research of all models are wrong, some are useful. We're never going to model things absolutely correctly. So we do the best we can. So we need to make sure we are aware of our assumptions and we keep them very forward in everything that we're doing and talking to stakeholders about this. I often find myself talking to people at the models I'm running now that they've interpreted the results incorrectly because they just had the assumption wrong. They didn't know they didn't know the assumption was there. And I've then talk to them and I think, okay, how do I make sure you don't have this mistake in the future? So what are your assumptions? And you want to do this early, often, and all the time. You want to CYA as much as you can. So that's the analytics problem framing domain. Let's talk about the data. In data, you're going to be identifying data needs and your sources, creating that data management plan, acquiring the data and preparing it, assessing the data quality, documenting those findings, and then again, validating those problem statements. This is when you start figuring out of the problem statements, do you have the data that's available, or do you need to go figure out where you do get that data from? Are you gonna have to make up something? I don't say just make things up. I'm saying if you say this data doesn't exist, it's not gonna exist. I gotta find some plausible scenarios of what I think my baseline is. Now, some things I've noticed in analytics, people tend to think analytics is domain 3. They think that's all it is. It's just domain 3. And so I've had a couple times when people, not more than a couple times really, people come up to me and they were like, oh, okay, I had this problem and I got data for it. So here's the data. So go solve this problem. And then I start asking questions about the data. Where did it come from? How was it obtained? What are what are the assumptions in this data set? And they don't know because they thought as long as I had some data, I could do work. I've also seen a lot of organizations as they start getting their analytics capability set up, they do a lot of, okay, we just need to focus on the data. We'll get a lot of data. We'll make it really clean and make this really great data that people can access, and then we can do analytics. But really, you got to look at the whole picture, that all 7 domains of, well, why do you need the data? And that's going to guide what you'll be able to do, or what data you really want to be collecting and cleaning and doing the work on before you spend a lot of time creating data sets that no one's using anyway. And you don't also have to wait, even if you identify all your data, you don't have to wait till it's totally perfect in order to start using it. There's this Doheny axiom, which is the best way to improve the quality of your data is to make decisions based on it, by Sean Doheny, and this was quoted in the book Leading Analytics by Joseph Kazir. I see everyone here is a CapEx as well. So this is that idea of, again, so often I say that we have to wait for the data to be perfect. No, you can get started without the data being perfect. You're going to figure out what you need to fix in your data as you start using it, especially as you start making decisions on it. So that was the data. Let's talk about the methods. How do we pick what methods to use? So in this domain, tasks include determining appropriate methods, evaluating those, understanding the technical solution architecture. How is it going to work? Do you have the architecture to handle the technical solution? What's the tech stack you currently have? So again, going back to this analytics continuum, if you're in predictive analytics, you're thinking, okay, what type of predictions do you need? Is this statistics predictions? Is it more machine learning? Which techniques might make sense for you? Which techniques are available to you? Whether that's just knowledge of them, or what can you actually do with the software, the technology that you have? So often the methods available and the tech available, these are really going to balance each other out. So an example here is Python. I know a lot of people love Python. I know a lot of schools are really focused on Python. If I try to do something in Python and deploy it in my current organization, it's not going to go very far. Not many people know Python, and especially organizations that aren't analytics focused. So if I want to do something in Python, I can, but I got to think about those other domains. How will my stakeholders respond to this? How will it last long time, like the long term? Like, will I be able to deploy this to someone else? Are they going to have to download some Python libraries too? Or are we going to deploy this in a way they don't have to download Python themselves? In the long term, I might need to make sure I'm having more documentation in order for someone to pick up the methods I'm choosing, so that when someone else eventually takes over my job or takes over my models, that they can still continue them. They're not going, I have no idea what this meant. I'm going to make sure I document things. Maybe I need to do a lot more training with people to get more people upskilled in Python. And you can substitute Python here with any technology that you want. So oftentimes the tech available to you is going to influence the methods you have to choose from. So again, these things that you're figuring out the balance as you're planning analytics work, as you're reviewing the current work in progress, as you come into a team thinking about what methods are they using versus what they could be using. So now that we've got the method problem, so now let's put it all together. Let's start building our models. So in building the models, we are designing the model structure, we're building the appropriate models, we're running the models and calibrating them, and then multiple models combining. And in my experience, usually it's multiple models that we are combining. I've very rarely had situations where it's a single model. And then document. Again, we're going to document things, but this is really the fun stuff. This is when we think analytics professionals, this is what we tend to think that we do. This is what it might be for many people. This is the most of what we do, but we tend to think this is all we do. So an example here is these are my dogs, and I like to throw them in webinars because it's fun for me. But you see, I like to dress them up in outfits, and I like to play with them and pet them, and we have a great time. I'm actually surprised that neither of them are on the beanbag behind me right now. But with these dogs, we tend to think of as having a dog means that's what I'm doing. I'm dressing them up when I'm playing with them. That's it. But there's so much more to dog ownership. I need to feed them. I need to feed them on time because they get very upset if they're not fed on time. I need to buy them food. I need to work to make the money to buy them food. The dog on the right is allergic to other dogs. I got to take him to the vet once a month to get allergy shots to handle his allergy symptoms. So I have all these other things I got to do, take care of dogs. So that's my analogy here of model building. We tend to think that's what we do as analytics professionals, all we do, but no, we got to think about everything else too in order to make our models meet what people need and then usable for what they need. So that's the model development. Let's talk about model deployment. So this is now you're going to validate that what you did with the analytics solution meets the business needs. Deliver that business validation report. Again, obtain stakeholder alignment. This is what people are looking for. Create requirements for the deployed solution, especially as you're planning, like what's this solution going to look like. Supporting the implementation and then supporting the deployment validation, making sure what you did deploy is what's needed. So often, again, with analytics, we're thinking about this, we think that we are making the model, we give it to the users, and then we celebrate. And that's it. And that is, to me, completely not realistic at all. So not realistic. But so often I see this. I'm sponsoring a student project right now, and they're working on and I use this framework when I created the proposal for the project to say this is what I expect in each thing. The model development is really up to the students. I can provide data, they can ask for more things, but the methods they select and the developing the model is really up to them, and then they need to give me the model in the end. And I had a requirements of what I need at the end. And we're now halfway through the semester, and they keep talking about these models they create, which is great. And I keep saying, what about when I get it? How do we make sure I can use this? How do I make sure other people at my company can use what you're going to give us? So we're thinking about small deployments all throughout. We're not just waiting until we're ready to hand the model over. We're thinking about as we're developing it, because again, all these domains interact. Deployment and then lifecycle management. This is when you're tracking the performance, maintaining the solution, supporting training activities, validating the business over time, making sure that this is making sense, analyzing the side effects. This is a big thing, especially ethically. How are people using the model over time? Does it still make sense of what they're doing? Are they using it in ways that you never accounted for, that you didn't expect? So many times, as much as you thought about how the model's going to use, it gets used in a way you never would have realized. And so maybe what they're doing is totally fine. Maybe it's not. So analyzing those side effects as time goes on, and maintaining documentation. Again, very important. And again, so often in analytics, we're not thinking about lifecycle management from the beginning. So what I often see, and again, in my experience, I've mostly worked in small organizations that have analytics not as their main, it's not their main product. But someone makes a model, using the model, and it's great. And then over time, people lose connection to that model. So I have a nemesis, his name is Rob. We've never met. Rob made a bunch of models in the office I worked for in the Coast Guard when I did human resources analytics. He made a bunch of models, and apparently they're very good. But in the Coast Guard at the time, it's gotten better since then. But at the time, they didn't see analytics as a career path. So you do a couple years, and you want to do it again. So everyone doing these models didn't have an experience to understand this. When I'm making models, how are people going to use it years from now? Especially if I'm not going to be in that job forever. And no matter who you are, what job you had, no one's going to be in that job forever. No one's going to use this model forever. So how do we set people up for success later on? And Rob became a nemesis because he made these models and people were using them. And by the time I got there, it had been a couple of years since he had been there, and it was this idea of no, you just press the buttons to update over time with new data, like his models, but don't touch the actual model apart. We don't want to break things, and it was just this being scared to touch anything. But it really lost the connection of some of that. What were the decisions made initially? What were the assumptions made within? It wasn't well documented. So over time, you get frustrated. You get more and more frustrated until, but you, well, especially in many jobs, you don't have the time to just start over. But eventually, you get so frustrated, you decide you are going to start over, and then you make money. You get back into the cycle, and you don't. The cycle might happen, but you want to avoid the cycle as much as you can. So don't become someone's nemesis. Rob, if you're out there, we've never met. It's going to be really weird if we do. Don't become someone's nemesis because you didn't think about the life cycle management early on and often and continuously. And also, in most of my work, I've come into roles where some model already exists. I'm not doing everything from scratch. So I'm thinking, where are we in the life cycle management of these models? It's this constant idea of what are we doing with the models? How are people using it? And what do we need to do update over time? And at what point do we decide to sunset something and start over where it makes sense, and not just because we all got frustrated with it? So those were the 7 domains walked through. Again, it's not a linear process, but there are the 7 domains overall to think about. So that was the big picture. What is this framework? So let's talk more specifically in industry, how you can use this, how I use this. So again, I use this framework all the time. I had a meeting this morning. I was talking about it of, oh, this thing about if we do make this decision, how's it going to affect long term, or do we have the data for this? And we're talking about this framework. I don't necessarily always use the exact words of like domain 1, domain 2, but I'm definitely using this framework to help show. Let's make sure we're thinking about all the things we should be thinking about here. So in industry, oftentimes new initiatives, if you're doing something new, you can consider all 7 domains when you're planning, and of course be ready to iterate, change your mind about things, and go back and forth between the domains to figure out what do you need to do, what's the business problem, what's that lifecycle management going to look like. So an example here is I recently learned I need to start over on a certain modeling aspect of what I do. In our digital twin of our generation portfolio at my utilities company, we model one of the kind of the sub models in there is a capacity for the thermal plants. So thermal plants burn fuel like coal or natural gas or animal waste, and it burns these things, and then you get power from it. And how much you burn creates power, but the weather affects how much power you're going to get out of the amount of fuel. And we learned over the summer that there's some heat waves, and that's what we have in that model of the weather to affect the capacity. It's not well calibrated. So we learned this. It's not well calibrated. We basically need to start over with it. And we might end up deciding in the end, but we'll stick with what we had. But we need to start over with this. How do we calibrate this? So, but using all 7 domains to think about and plan, what are we going to do with this? So not just make some new model and that's the end of it. It's, well, who's going to be using this? Are they going to agree to it? Are the stakeholders going to align with what I'm doing? How do I make sure that when someone decides that what I did needs to be updated in a couple of years so that we can do this easily? We're not starting from scratch. But of course, like I mentioned earlier, most things are in ongoing initiatives. Very rarely every single thing you're doing a brand new thing. You can start from scratch. So most of my career has been coming into models that already exist. So my current job, I work in, like I said, hydropower and other power generation modeling. And so I came in, we have an application that is basic mixed integer programming to say what's the best we can do with current situations, what's long term if we add things like batteries, what happens. But this application already existed when I joined. So in this, I can use this framework to say, okay, what I've been doing, where do we need to go, especially different features we have built into it, creating these roadmaps. And again, using this common language of the inference analytics framework to guide and communicate what we're going to be doing. And then we want to make some change. How's that going to impact all the domains? So if I make it like the new initiative I just mentioned, when I change that input, that the model becomes that thermal capacity is an input to our optimization model. So I change that input will affect our optimization model. Will people appreciate it, or not just appreciate it, but agree with it, or will it be problematic? So try and think about all the domains when making changes to the current initiatives. Other things that come up a lot in industry, again, communicating. I think I've said it a few times now, but it's a big thing using these common words, but also be having something to point to, especially if you're more junior or you're the only person doing analytics at your organization, or you're one of the few. It can be really nice to point to this framework to say, well, this is what Informs says to do. And Informs is vendor neutral, technology neutral, industry neutral. It's nonprofit. It's not these consultants said this. It's Informs said this. And so we can communicate these different ideas with the backing of this framework. Building teams. So when you're building teams, you can think about that if everyone's a T-shaped professional, how do you get everyone's lined up so that you cover all your bases? If you have 5 people on your team and everyone's really, really good at model building, well, who's going to be actually directing like what you're building? Who's going to be doing the business problem framing and the analytics problem framing? Who's thinking about the deployment and the model lifecycle management? So thinking about using the framework to help build teams and fill in gaps on your team. And also, if you're upskilling people, what do you need to upskill them in? With that, writing the job descriptions. You can use this to both to write job description to figure out what are you really looking for, especially if you go into the 3 levels of the cap levels of, are you looking for someone out of school? Are you looking for someone with experience? Are you looking for someone in between those 2 levels to figure out, okay, what do you need this person to do? And then line that up to the framework to figure out, oh, wait, you want to hire someone out of school, but you're not going to find them out of school with the skill set you're looking for. You need to have someone more experienced. And then it also helps people looking for jobs to see what are they going to be expected to do. And with that, planning professional development. So again, looking at the gaps of what do you want your team to learn? If you're a manager, what on the framework maybe you want to learn so that you can better communicate with your team or better understand what can be done when it comes to analytics at your organization. And of course, ... because there's a lot more ways you can use this. This is just a kind of a quick ways I use this all the time and ways to think about, but there's many people out there who probably have many more ways that they can share of how they use this in industry. So with that, industry, let's talk about academia. I'm not in academia, but I do talk to a lot of people who use this in academia. This is where I got this information from. So if an educator, you can use this to develop your whole curriculum. You can base your curriculum around this framework to say, I want to make sure students are learning the things in this framework. There are schools that are doing this. If you're an educator and you're doing this, you want to learn more, or you want to start doing this, Informs has resources, including connecting you with schools that are already doing this. And then with that, you can have course development, where you have a course, maybe especially those courses about how do you put these things you've been learning in school into practice. You can use this framework to guide that course development. Capstone projects, same thing. As you're planning the capstone projects, go around the framework to have your students follow the framework so they get all those thoughts. They're not just making a model and calling it a day, and they're also thinking about how are people going to use this long term. And giving career advice. You can help people sometimes use this in their resumes, or you can help people prepare for interviews using the framework, and also thinking about in those job descriptions they're reading, what jobs make sense for them, what parts of the framework do they really want to focus on in their own jobs? Because again, not everyone's going to do every single thing all the time, but maybe they really want to focus on a couple of the domains. So it can be very helpful for giving them career advice of this, again, vendor neutral, technology neutral, industry neutral framework, so that wherever they go, they can still use this. So if you're a student, really parallel to that, what educators do, you can use it to pick schools. I've had 2 people in the past month reach out to me and tell me that they're thinking about, they really want to get into operations research. They don't really know how to start. They do not have a background in it. And they're thinking about potentially going to school. How do they pick a school? And I'm like, well, you can use this framework. This framework talks about, it shows what analytics professionals do, what analytics projects look like. So look at that and maybe find like, what do you want to do? What do you want to learn? What do you want to focus on? Use that to pick your school. And then once you're at your school, course selection, especially if you're in a program that has a lot of electives, and using the framework to figure out what do you want to learn about when you're choosing your courses to take. With your capstone project, I would love if every capstone project I ever sponsored followed this framework. It doesn't always work out that way, but it makes everything easier for everyone, but also gives you that experience of using the framework so that when you have your job interviews, during your job searches, you can use this framework to show not just that you made a really good model, but also you understood why you made it, and you understood where it was going to go and how it was going to be used. And again, if you're an educator or a student and you want to learn more about this, Informs has more resources for you. That was in academia. So let's talk about other things in your life. Talk about analytics. I keep saying it, communication. This gives us this framework gives us the language and the communication. And so I've talked about, talking about it at work, talking about with students, but also I use this to talk about it to people who don't know what I do, like friends I have outside the analytics community. My grandmother, I'll use the 7 domains. I'm not telling my grandmother, okay, domain 1 is this. But I do know from the domains, I start with a business problem of, oh, I work at a utilities company and I make math models to make better decisions. She doesn't know the rest of what I do, and that's fine. But I can use this framework to help me talk to people who don't know analytics, who want to know enough, but they're not looking for all the details. Again, job interviews. If you're an interviewer, it's going to be very helpful to ask, when you're planning what questions to ask your candidates, think about the full framework. So often I see we focus too much on the data and methodology selection and the model building parts, but we're not thinking about the other domains when we're looking for candidates, even though we expect the candidates to be able to do those other domains. So make sure you're asking about those in the interviews. And as an interviewee, be ready to answer questions related to all the domains. From my own experience, if you're a candidate who can give examples and not just you picked a certain prediction model to use and you use that, but you tell me why you used it and what happens next, then it would make you stand out as a candidate. Professional development, that thinking about that long-term, what gaps you want to fill wherever you are in your career, whether you're an analytics professional and you have the certification, or you don't have certification, or you just want to learn about analytics in general, you can use this framework to decide, like, what do you want to learn more. Maybe when you're looking through the full framework, those words you're like, I don't even know what that means. Hey, that's a good place to start. Go learn that. And also with the 3 levels, using the levels to guide figure out where you are and where you want to go next. So if you're coming new in analytics, look at that Cap E. Don't feel like you got to do Cap X level things right away, because that's going to come more with time, but focus on the Cap E tasks first. Attending conferences. When you attend conferences, especially for professional development reasons, you can use this framework to decide what you're going to do. And also there's more than just what the slide is showing, of course. There's way more ways you can use this in your life. But let's talk more about this attending conferences. So the Informs Analytics Plus Conference 2026 is going to be held in April. The Gaylord National Resort, that's in the Washington, D.C. area, National Harbor. And this webinar, I realize a lot of people might not realize this. This webinar is part of a series of webinars leading up to the conference. We said, hey, we want to make sure people have this information coming into the conference. And if you can't go to the conference, we still want you to have this information, of course. But I'm on the planning committee for this conference, and we are balancing this program using this. We're using, when we describe sessions, we're using the 7 domains to describe them. We're also making sure we have programming for each cap level, so that wherever you are or might be in your career, that there's something for you. So we don't want you to end up in a bunch of talks that go over your head. We also don't want you in a bunch of talks where you're going, I already know all of this. We want to make sure you find the right level, and you also be able to easily find the sessions that make sense for what you want to learn about and what you want to talk to people about, because so much of the conference is talking to other people. We want to make sure you're connecting with people that you want to connect with. So when we were making this conference, we're using the framework because we can, and it's there, but why not? So you can think about it if you're going to the conference, planning your time in the conference around the framework. And as part of this, like I said, this is a webinar series. The next webinar in this series is going to be Terry Rouse. It's going to be communication skills for scene analytics. So I've talked a lot about how communication is important, and he's going to have a lot about communication itself. So December 11th, 1 p.m. I signed up as soon as I saw that it was available. I was like, oh, that sounds great. I'm going to go to that. And so highly recommend. Again, this is going to be like this one. It's free, whether or not you go to that conference. Hope you check it out. And these webinars are going to be on the recorded on YouTube. And they're being recorded and they're going to be on YouTube. So if you came in late, you missed the beginning of this webinar, it's going to be on YouTube. And if you want my slides, I'll go in your life. If you want these slides, we're not just like giving them out to anyone, but if you're in a group like a Informs chapter or some other professional group, or like your company, or you're involved in like a student group and you want to have a discussion on the Informs Analytics framework, we will provide these slides and help you tailor them to whatever your audience itself or what they're going to best take away from. Just let us know, and we're happy to provide. We can also provide me or other people to give a talk on this inference analytics framework because we're very happy with it. We're very proud of it. We also find it super useful and super important. So we want to get this out there as much as we can. So with that, I'm going to leave this up for questions so we can just keep looking at it, but open to questions and comments and math jokes.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. That was great. We do have some good questions here. The first one is to realize this framework, what other expertise or teams like engineering, UX, design are required? Is the framework just meant to focus on one aspect, and which is I'm sorry, let me reread the second part. Is the framework just meant to focus on one aspect, which is the analytics dimension?
It really is about the analytics dimension, but it's also to then communicate with the other dimensions. So in my team, I'm the only OR person directly at my company, and then within my team as well, we have someone who knows a lot about analytics but does not have an education background in it, and we have a lot of software developers who this is not like I would not tell the software developers like go use this framework all the time. That wouldn't make a lot of sense to them. But I can use it to communicate with them what we need for the analytics application that we have. And so it is focused on the analytics part for the projects, the initiatives, the people doing the analytics, but it's not necessarily trying to be every single thing for every single person who might be related to analytics. There's something for everyone, but it's not necessarily the whole thing.
Great, thank you. The next question is, do you refer to the framework during your projects or mostly just to help you figure out what skills you need to study?
I do both. I refer to the framework. I don't necessarily like pull up a slide. I have. I don't necessarily do it though. But I have referred to the framework. I've like I was in a meeting this morning talking about how we want to add something to our application, and I referred to the framework of this. Hey, let's make sure we're thinking about this analytics solution framework. Oh, so the analytics solution domain. No, what am I saying? The domain 7, the analytics solution lifecycle management domain, as we're gonna do this feature of what does that mean for the long-term aspects that we should be considering when we're making changes now. So I don't always refer directly to it because that would just get confusing. People don't know what it is, but I do refer to it. I refer to it directly as the Informed Analytics Framework. I've shared it with people. I've given talks on this to people at my company. I recently nominated my team for the best innovative analytics team in utilities. I think I got that right. Is the Utilities Industry Award for analytics teams. And I cited this in our awards application of we use this to help guide us in what we're doing with analytics. So I don't I refer it really depends on the situation, but I do refer to it directly.
That's great, and good luck to your team.
Oh, we won. Yeah,
Oh,
that was yeah. It was like two
congratulations.
months ago I did the nomination for it, but we won 2 weeks ago. It's very exciting. Thank you. But
You're welcome.
the framework helped us in the communicating of this is what we do, this is how we're thinking about everything, this is a framework that we're using. But I cited it directly in our application.
Cool. All right. What are some approaches you use to plan for life cycle management requirements?
One approach. I realize this is going to be a reference a lot of people don't know, but there was a Mad TV skit from probably 20 years ago where the person just said and then, and it was like they're working at a um like a fast food place and they're taking someone's order and the person says like I want a burger and the person goes and then and the person ordering okay and fries and then they say, and then okay and a drink and they but she keeps saying and then and people just get they're more and more frustrated and like it kind of sticks with you and you see it. But that's one approach to just keep asking and then okay I'm gonna make this model and then okay I'm gonna give it to people and then and just keep asking and then and you start figuring things out of okay now they're gonna use it. What does that mean when they use it? Okay, well, they're gonna make these decisions and then what? And then. So that's one thing. Another thing is to document it, everything, and then thinking about if I'm not in this job in 3 years or 5 years, whatever time you want to put down, how are people gonna take over? And what's going to make sense? Are they going to get frustrated? Am I going to become someone's nemesis? But thinking about that, what would happen if I'm not here to do what I just made, the decision I added? If I'm not here, who's going to take over? What does that mean for the model? And what does it mean for the organization itself?
Great, thank you. Um, this one is about certification.
Okay.
There are so many analytics certifications in the marketplace. How is this different and what kind of recognition it carries?
Okay, so that's two parts. So how's it different, and then what type of recognition? So how's it different is just like informs the certification is industry, vendor, and technology neutral. So I got the cap um, first when I was still in the military because I wanted to be able to show potential employers outside of the military that I've been doing industry standards analytics work. Because a lot of people will see, oh, you've been in the military, that's not what we do. I want to show, look, I meet this. And it's applied both in that job when I was doing human resource analytics. That's very, very different from what I do today. But it's still applied. And I now work for a utilities company doing optimization. It still applies. Um, and so it's very applicable in that way. So but it's not specific to any sort of technology. It's not like a coding in Python or using Ruby certification. It's not a I'm really good at simulation certification. It's I have the full package analytics, and I'm a professional that can understand, figure out what are we doing, why are we doing it, and then what happens once we do this. So how recognition is growing. I will freely admit that a lot of times it's been very helpful for me on my resume as a conversation starter. Either people know what it is and they want to talk about it, or they don't know what it is, and I now get to focus the conversation on how I'm an analytics professional who meets these industry standards. And industry being analytics, right? Industry, not industry like utilities industry, but it's a very good conversation topic. So I will say it's not big enough yet for people to say like cap required on job descriptions, but there are now more and more job descriptions have cap preferred. But like I said, it's been very helpful for me. I've had it for 8 years, and I've been it's every 3 year renewal. I've been renewing it every 3 years because I find it very valuable for my own career.
Great, thank you. The next one is, how can an organization that is undergoing a business metamorphosis from product to service industry, particularly in identifying emerging opportunities, predicting market behavior, or guiding transformation and helping in management decisions?
So in doing these shifts, it's that going to that domain one of what do you need to be doing, and then going to domain two of okay, are these analytics problems? But also thinking in this shift, what does that shift your work? Are you going if you're going from product to service? What was that should we're talking about here? I probably want to know more. But what does this mean for you? Are there more methods out there you should be ready to use in case something calls for it? Is there new things with data in like domain three with data that should be aware of so that when you want to use them, they're ready.
Yes, so
So
I
it's
think
yeah.
I was going to say
Go
there's a clarification here that says this might be a leadership or change process. When an organization is undergoing a major metamorphosis, what analytical methodologies or governance frameworks best help leaders navigate uncertainty while maintaining data-driven decision making?
Yeah, so I would say this framework would just be overall helpful of going through and figuring out what makes sense for the leaders and also giving the leaders a framework to use. I was on a non-influence conference a couple weeks ago, and I was on a panel about do you build something yourself or do you buy it off the shelf? And someone asked me, well, how do you even decide that? They do have frameworks like, oh, the influence analytics framework, it's out there, it's available to you. You don't have to go through consultants to use it. You don't have to. It's not specific to any one thing, so it's there for everyone to use, and management and leaders can use it to say where are we use it as a roadmap of where are we, where we want to go, where do we potentially want to go.
Great. How does the Informs Analytics framework compare with other analytics frameworks? Is it a more well-known and utilized framework compared to other frameworks?
Depends on who you ask because well known is definitely um you know uh subjective of for me I don't have all the ones that I have that I use that make a lot of sense to me. But I know there's the CRISP-DM when this cap framework was originally made in 2013, it had a lot of references to CRISP-DM, and from what I understand, that was the big gap in there was the business problem framing. So it's comparable in that regard, but it doesn't have that. This is the full picture, whereas that one didn't have that business problem framing aspect. I am not a CRISP DM expert. Please don't come after me if I got that part wrong, but I know there's a lot of overlap there. I know that some of the military services have their own way of looking at things. I know the U.S. Marine Corps has a framework they use for analytics projects, and there's a lot of overlap and tie-ins to this. I know that because I know someone has a CAP that gave a presentation at the Military Operations Research Society this past summer who talked all about how this framework is useful because of how much overlaps with this other one. So it becomes that, again, communicating that all the Marines they worked with knew that Marine Corps framework they were using, but how do you get to other industries, especially if you're transitioning out of the Marine Corps and other people aren't going to use it. So there's other frameworks out there, but I don't know of any that are this comprehensive and also, like I said, industry neutral.
Great, thank you. There's one from the chat, speaking of military. I am As I am working as an ORSA for the Department of Army, I am also working on a PhD in computational social science, which I believe leads to OR and other engineering, as well as the area of social sciences, poli-sci history, psych, and other social sciences, etc., are starting to begin to intermingle. How does or can the analytical framework support such areas which are not truly OR, but are a combination of both?
Yeah. So because this again is industry neutral, you can use this framework of okay, the analytics parts that you're doing, how does that relate to the non-analytics parts? Because like the business problem framing is a really big deal. And then thinking about how this is going to get used, of whatever we're doing with analytics, how's that going to get used, how's that going to get interpreted, and this framework can help identify what you need to be doing with that. I'm not there's a lot of words there, and I'm not the best at repeating all the words, but I'm not familiar with exactly with that field. I haven't done it, but is that you can use this to help bridge that the technical parts that you're thinking about doing analytics and the business stakeholders or the organization you'll be working with as whatever you're doing, and how you can use this to bridge the communication with them.
Great, thank you. Another question is, are there any textbooks or reading material that you would recommend that covers the Informs Analytics framework?
I think number one is the framework itself, of course. When it comes to textbooks, I'm not a good reader, so I personally don't have good textbooks. I know I don't know if this has been updated, but long time like 10 years ago, there was the Booz Allen Hamilton Field Guide to Data Science I really liked. I have not seen in a couple years, so I don't know how great that was still is. But when it comes to textbooks, other books like when I read books, I tend to read. Again, I'm not in academia at all. I like to read like books about like how problems were solved and like or maybe side effects of problems being solved or like how people reacted to them. The Informs has a book club, and some of the I haven't read all the books in the book club in the past year, but I've read a few of them and I can't remember their names off the top of my head. I know that Garrett at Informs, who runs the book club, just published a list of these books. So those might be books to think about going into looking into if you want to see like how do a lot of these come together and things success stories and also things that didn't go as well you can learn from.
Right. We also have the Informs Analytics body of knowledge, which is
Yes.
a good starting place also.
And I will admit I have not read that because of the price point.
Okay, thank you.
So I realize it's not affordable. It's not necessarily the affordable for everybody. But if you want to read it, I recommend it if you're able to.
Great, thank you. Well, Kathryn, we appreciate this. This was a wonderful presentation that you gave. We will get this recording onto YouTube, and we hope to see you December 11th at 1 p.m. for our next webinar. Thanks for coming.